Chapter 36. Kay looked at Zeke with a dumbfounded expression at his confident proposal. It was hard to gauge how much she should trust him. Do you know what kind of person Don Juan is? Zeke smirked. There's probably no one who knows Don Juan better than me. During his time as a hitman for McCain in his previous life, Zeke was part of Don Juan's direct cleaning crew. He took care of all the dirty work of the cartel, killing and threatening the bosses of rival cartels. Thanks to Zeke, the McCain cartel was able to solidify its position as the #1 cartel in the South as Zeke had risen to the executive level, which was rare for a hitman. He knew various secrets of the cartel. I know everything from Don Juan's secret vault to the nobles and politicians he bribes. It was difficult to bring down all the giant cartel forces with his own power alone, but if he could use the syndicate's intelligence network to manipulate the various cartel forces, he could orchestrate their downfall from behind the scenes. When the cartels weakened themselves by fighting each other, Zeke could simply swallow them whole. However, it was too risky for him, a Draker, to do it himself. That's why he intended to use the Syndicate and Kay as his proxies. He planned to control everything from behind Kay without revealing himself, and if that happened, he could manipulate the South without leaving any trace. It was a feasible plan for Zeke, and to implement this plan, he first needed to meet Don Juan, the boss of the McCain cartel. When Kay didn't readily answer, Zeke stood up. Think about it carefully and contact me when you've made up your mind. Zeke left the room without hesitation. Kay couldn't get up from her seat for a long time even after he left. No matter how much she thought about it, she couldn't understand why this was suddenly happening to her. She pondered, looking at Zeke's signature engraved on her wrist. A week later, Zeke finally entered Valhalla, a place where talented individuals from all over the continent gathered. It was a place Zeke in his previous life couldn't even dream of entering. Valhalla was almost the size of a town, and unlike the stifling atmosphere of the academy, Valhalla was very free. Students were gathered in groups on the campus, laughing and chatting, or lying on the grass, sunbathing. There were also students reading books on benches and quite a few people jogging in the morning. The atmosphere is very different from what I expected. Zeke, who was used to the rigid atmosphere of the cradle and the academy, found this free atmosphere unfamiliar. Just then, someone approached Zeke. Hey, are you Zeke by any chance? Zeke glanced at the person who called him. A man with flashy hair was swaggering towards him. Judging by his reddish-brown skin, he seemed to be from the desert region or the southern continent. The man struck a strange pose, patted his chest, and then held out his fist towards Zeke. When Zeke just stared blankly, the man shrugged and said, "It'll take a while for our bro Zeke to get rid of that academy stiffness." Zeke looked at the man and said, "Are you that buddy guy or whatever?" The man mimicked Zeke's voice and said, "Buddy guy or whatever. Hey, bro, what's up? Peace. Relax a bit." Zeke wondered if this clown in front of him was really a Valhalla student. His behavior reminded him of the Soma addicts in the Empire. The man grinned and led Zeke, who still had a hesitant expression. "I'm Diego Villa. Nice to meet you, bro." Zeke was surprised to hear Diego's name. "Are you really Diego Villa?" Diego struck another strange pose and shouted, "Peace." Zeke looked at him with an even more dubious expression. Is this guy the future Knight of Rhymes? Diego Villa was one of the 5 knights who fought in the Third Continental War. Diego Villa, the Knight of Rhymes; Reyna Draker, the Knight of Flash; Jeff Fricksalma, the Knight of Smoke; Bishop Caustic, the Knight of Silence; Aster Aladolf, the Knight of Illusions. People praised the achievements of those who played a major role in the Third Continental War, calling them the 5-star knights. Zeke, watching Diego leading him and introducing him to Valhalla, thought of the other 5-star knights. Except for Reyna, the other 4 weren't Drakers. What if I made all those I could meet in Valhalla my subordinates? If he had the 5-star knights as his subordinates in addition to the mercenary King Liam, he would be able to build his forces much faster. Valhalla is a treasure trove of talent. There might be hidden talents who haven't gained fame in the future. Zeke nodded inwardly, thinking that he might be able to find talented individuals, including the 5-star knights, to bring into his forces later. After wandering around for a while, it was time for lunch, so the two entered a restaurant. "Zeke bro, you have to try the food here in Valhalla." The place Diego led him to was a restaurant serving Southern Continent home-style food. Zeke wasn't too keen on Southern food because his memories of his time in the South in his previous life weren't very pleasant. But he took a seat nonetheless. Soon, a hearty Southern-style meal was served. Zeke picked up a tortilla and put it in his mouth. This is delicious." Diego grinned at his positive reaction and patted Zeke's shoulder. While eating, Zeke listened to Diego's story. He was from a small kingdom in the southern continent and was studying abroad in the central continent. Diego had been forced to learn the clan's traditional dual swordsmanship from a young age, but he was so talented that he surpassed his father, who was his teacher, at the age of 15. But I like making music more. Speaking of which, how about joining our club, bro? He said it was a club that researched fusion New Age music based on the rhythms of Southern traditional music mixed with Central Continent melodies. But Zeke refused, saying he couldn't understand the explanation. In fact, he wasn't interested in music, and he didn't have the time for it either. After finishing their meal and chatting, Diego suggested they attend a class together in the afternoon. Can we just go to a senior class? Those academy guys. Valhalla is free. Peace. Anything related to learning is allowed. Bro, let's go. Zeke was dragged along by Diego and decided to attend the class together. The place Diego took him to was a liberal arts class with the strange title of special lecture by a leading figure in the Central Continent. Zeke, following Diego, sat in the large lecture hall with a sullen expression. Bro, smile, Diego said cheerfully to Zeke, and Zeke felt a little tired seeing Diego constantly talking beside him. Maybe I can leave this guy out of the 5-star Knights. As he was thinking this, the students around them started murmuring. They were whispering and glancing at Zeke sitting next to Diego. It seemed they had noticed him when he turned around because Diego's voice was quite loud. Zeke wondered what was going on as he saw the students murmuring while looking at them. Diego, hearing the students' murmurs, suddenly made a fuss. What? Zeke bro, you're a Draker. Zeke looked at Diego with a dumbfounded expression. You didn't know that until now? I just thought you were from the academy. I thought you were acting all arrogant for no reason, but so that's why. Just then, a group of students approached Zeke. Are you Zeke Draker? Nice to meet you. I'm Doug from the Roswell clan. I graduated from the academy in 1025. It was a clan name that sounded somewhat familiar. Zeke asked Doug, do you have a younger brother? Doug nodded with a satisfied expression. You know Durbin? Well, I hear there's no one in the academy who doesn't know Durbin the Slasher. My younger brother is also scheduled to enter Valhalla next year. He thought he had heard it somewhere, and as expected, it was true. Zeke inwardly wondered if the level of Valhalla was lower than he thought since Durbin the Slasher was entering. But in fact, Durbin's skills were among the top in the academy, even though he was beaten by Zeke. Moreover, the Roswell clan was a prestigious clan that had a close relationship with the Siemens, one of the influential Draker clans. For a long time, it was no coincidence that the brothers Doug and Durbin entered Valhalla. But Zeke ignored Doug's words and was seriously contemplating the level of Valhalla. And without knowing what was going on inside Zeke, not only Doug, but also the children of other prominent clans in the Central Continent flocked to Zeke. Zeke Draker, I'm from a prominent clan in Thebes. I'm from Alencia. I'm the second son of the Central Continent Fruit Guild. Everyone was curious about Zeke, the super rookie who had reached the level of a Blue Knight at the age of 15. Zeke was getting annoyed as more and more people gathered around him. He glared at Diego, who was smiling cluelessly beside him. Just then, clap, clap, a loud clapping sound rang out, and the people who had flocked around Zeke dispersed and took their seats. It was none other than Headmaster Flaubert himself, who had come up to the podium. Zeke finally realized why there were so many nobles from the Central Kingdom in a simple liberal arts class. It was a class where Headmaster Flaubert personally invited prominent figures and listened to their life stories. But Diego, who had brought him here, started doing something else, taking out his notebook instead of listening to the lecture. He wrote the lyrics for a new song and showed them to Zeke. Hey, bro, how are these lyrics? The rhymes are awesome, right? Zeke quietly ignored Diego's whispering. Flaubert began introducing the guest speaker. I had a very difficult time inviting the person who will be speaking to you today. As he spoke, the headmaster nodded, and the door opened, and someone entered. Zeke's jaw dropped at the sight of the person who entered. Master Duke. Duke, dressed impeccably in a Draker suit, walked onto the podium. Then, the assistants behind him raised a placard on the podium. I, Duke Draker. How I became a Black Knight from the Academy's inferior class. The students' eyes sparkled with anticipation at the appearance of Duke Draker, the Knight of the Gale. The headmaster also stepped down from the podium and sat in the front row to listen to Duke's lecture. Duke, with a slightly nervous expression, held the voice amplifier. Ahem, it's an honor to be invited as a guest speaker to the Valhalla I've always admired. even though I couldn't become a student here. The students all laughed heartily at his words. Zeke, seeing the students reacting to every word Duke said and laughing loudly, could feel the power of true authority. Unlike when he was with Zeke, Duke was delighted to see the students' immediate and positive reactions. Amidst great expectations, Duke's life lecture began. Duke's life story continued for about 2 hours. Surprisingly, Duke was quite eloquent. The problem was that he was extremely talkative, although the students were listening attentively at first. Zeke could feel them gradually getting tired since they were knights. They weren't used to listening to other people's stories, except maybe during sparring sessions. As Duke's life story continued without end, even Headmaster Flaubert, who had invited him, had a slightly troubled expression. He gestured to Duke to wrap it up, but Duke, immersed in his own story, ignored the headmaster's signal and continued talking endlessly. So I said to the head of the clan, "Think again. This is really not it." Then Arthur. Just then, the door to the lecture hall opened, and someone walked in. Clank, clank. A knight clad in silver armor from head to toe, flowing platinum blonde hair that didn't match the armor, and a beautiful face like a statue. The students were startled and rose from their seats. "There's the Silver Knight. See Callie Draker." None other than the eldest of the Draker clan's direct descendants had appeared. Chapter 37. Callie Draker. She was Zeke's oldest sister, however. Zeke had rarely seen Callie Draker face to face in his previous life. The only times he saw her were from afar at clan events before entering the cradle. She was the eldest daughter of the Draker clan and one of the guardian knights of the Four Seasons Castle. There were thousands of knights belonging to the Four Seasons Castle, but among them, there were less than 10 guardian knights. Even Abel Draker, who already had his own knight order, had not yet received the title of guardian knight, so the fact that Callie Draker, who was still in her 30s, was a guardian knight was a remarkable feat. Callie Draker's achievements were indeed extraordinary. Isen, the largest port city in Midland, had suffered from pirates in the South Sea for over 100 years. The pirates, based in the Death Sea south of the Dorda Republic, were scattered in a cell-like organization, making it virtually impossible to completely eradicate them. However, after Callie Draker became an official knight of the Draker clan, the problem was solved. The first thing she did was take care of these South Sea pirates. She boarded the pirates' ships alone and slaughtered them all, chasing down those who fled and even wiping out those hiding on the islands. Fighting back was useless, and so was running away. Callie Draker quietly, decisively, and thoroughly eradicated the South Sea pirates, a problem that no one had been able to solve. 5 years later, pirates were nowhere to be found, at least in Isen, thanks to Callie Draker. The sea route of the Central Sea, which extended to the Dorda Republic and beyond to the Eastern Empire, was cleared. In recognition of this achievement, Callie Draker received the title of Guardian Knight at the youngest age ever. With Callie Draco appearing at the special lecture, the students began to get excited again. Duke was flustered as all the attention was suddenly taken away by Callie Draker taking advantage of this opportunity. Headmaster Flaubert gestured to Duke to quickly come down from the podium. Duke, having lost his place to the rising star, trudged down from the podium. The headmaster cleared his throat and went up to the podium again. "Today, we have a special guest, Callie Draker, famous as the Silver Knight. Since the previous lecture went on for a long time, we'll quickly invite the Silver Knight." Callie Draker politely greeted Flaubert and then went up to the podium. The platinum blonde female knight in silver armor stood before the students with a dignified posture. She looked like a Valkyrie from Legends. She spoke to the students without using the voice amplifier. Attention. Her resounding voice startled the students, and they straightened up without realizing it. Even Headmaster Flaubert flinched, so one can imagine how the ordinary students felt. She then bowed respectfully towards Duke. "To the esteemed Black Knight, Sir Duke Draker, I offer my greetings. First, everyone salute Sir Duke Draker." The students who graduated from the academy reflexively jumped to their feet and saluted Duke. The students who didn't graduate from the academy hesitated, following the salute awkwardly or glancing at Callie Draker. Only after the greetings did she stand at the podium again and begin her speech. "Gentlemen, I looked around Valhalla while coming to this special lecture today, and I am disappointed in you today." Callie Draker was a graduate of Valhalla before Flaubert became headmaster. At that time, the headmaster of Valhalla was from the Draker clan, so the discipline was stricter than it is now. She said in a stern voice, "The peace of the continent today was not achieved easily. It is a peace built on the blood of our senior knights. Compared to Callie Draker, Duke Draker was a milder version of a Draker. For 3 long hours, she emphasized the spirit of chivalry, the importance of strict discipline, and the necessity of rigorous training with a stern and serious attitude. Flaubert, listening to Callie Draker's lecture, covered his face with his hands. Damn Drakers. Flaubert resolved never to have another Draker as a lecturer. The students, who had been happy to see the Silver Knight in person, gradually turned pale. The special lecture finally ended after 3 hours of verbal assault, and they all left the lecture hall. Exhausted and zombified, Zeke, surprisingly, enjoyed Callie Draker's lecture. It's strict, but she has a point. Since Zeke had spent his entire life on the battlefield, he understood why she was saying those things. Rather, Zeke could feel the warmth and consideration hidden within Callie Draker's words. There would be no reason for her to give such advice if she didn't care. Hey, bro, wanna listen to the new song I wrote over 5 hours? Zeke shook his head at Diego's strange music. As he was about to leave the lecture hall after listening to Diego's bizarre music, someone approached him. Zeke. He turned around to find Callie Draker standing there. Zeke bowed his head to Callie Draker. It is an honor to meet you, Lady Callie Draker, Guardian Knight of the Four Seasons Castle. Callie Draker returned Zeke's polite greeting. She said to Zeke, could you spare me a moment? Her tone was stiff, as expected of a Draker. Zeke left Diego, who looked disappointed, and followed Callie. He thought she was going to invite him for a cup of tea or something, but surprisingly, Callie Draker took Zeke to the training ground. Callie Draker stood in the training ground and said to Zeke, prepare yourself. Without another word, Callie Draker instructed him to prepare for a spar. Zeke didn't know her intentions, but he decided to go along with her. He drew Bahamut from his back. At the same time, Callie Draker also drew her pure white sword. It was a sword made entirely of mithril, a gift from the Holy Kingdom. The Holy Kingdom, which had suffered the most from the pirates, had this mithril armor and sword specially crafted and gifted to Callie to express their gratitude for eradicating the pirates. As expected of the wealthy Holy Kingdom, they were generous. Thus, Callie Draker, clad in pure white armor and valiantly wielding a snow-white sword, earned the title of the Silver Knight. Callie Draker pointed her sword at Zeke and said, show me your full strength. Zeke Draker. At Callie's words, Zeke pointed his sword at her. Then I won't hold back. Zeke charged at Callie with phantom step. Clang. Zeke's sword clashed with Callie's. Callie matched Zeke's every move as he moved swiftly, leaving afterimages. As Callie swung her pure white sword, it left behind brilliant afterimages like blooming flowers. It was indeed the skill of the most beautiful and powerful knight on the continent. Whoosh. Zeke, sensing that Callie Draker's skills were extraordinary, stepped back. It wasn't just advanced swordsmanship she had learned, but true skill honed through actual combat. Zeke, who had lowered his skill level to that of a blue knight, was careful not to be discovered. If he was careless, the fact that he was hiding his true strength could reach the ears of the head of the clan. If news spread that he had already reached the level of a red knight, the clan would surely try to tie him down and prevent him from leaving. That would interfere with Zeke's plan to leave this place as soon as possible and freely build his own forces. When I can control the Drakers as I wish, then I will return to the clan. Whoosh. As Zeke regained his focus, Callie, seeing that he was only keeping his distance and not attacking, took the initiative. Crash. Callie Draker's strength was her greatest asset. Her sword contained far more power than that of ordinary knights. Whoosh. Zeke parried Callie's sword, found an opening, and thrust his sword. His body moved reflexively to counterattack, thanks to the countless sparring sessions he had with King Kaiser, where he was beaten to a pulp. Callie flinched at Zeke's sharp attack and retreated. She was surprised that her youngest brother possessed such outstanding talent. Excellent. A spontaneous compliment escaped her lips. Despite her usual reluctance to praise, Callie gripped her sword and focused her aura. Wong. A pure white aura blade, resembling her, enveloped her sword. She had raised her aura to properly gauge Zeke's skills. As Callie began to use her aura in earnest, Zeke also took a deep breath and summoned his aura blade. The atmosphere between the two was different now. Ping. They began to exchange blows at an invisible speed, passing each other by. Clang. Callie pressured Zeke with her brilliant swordsmanship. Zeke dodged Callie's attacks with phantom step, looking for an opening. Although she couldn't compare to Kaiser, she was undoubtedly an excellent swordswoman with a good balance of offense and defense. Zeke deflected Callie's sword and used the Dragon Slayer technique. Even the simple half-moon slash was incredibly powerful when used by Zeke. Callie's body was pushed back even though she blocked it with her sword, with her attack blocked. Zeke used phantom step to aim for Callie's blind spot and thrust his sword. Callie gathered her sword to her chest and concentrated her energy. Wong. Suddenly, a tremendous force surged from Callie's body. In fact, before Callie earned the title of Silver Knight, she already had a nickname that was on everyone's lips, the Great Strength Sword. Those who had faced her sword said it felt like facing a giant swing. That terrifying aura enveloped her entire body. At the same time, the aura blades surrounding her sword grew to the size of a bastard sword. She swung her great strength sword towards Zeke. Crash. Zeke hurriedly dodged her great strength sword with phantom step. The shockwave was so powerful that the floor of the training ground cracked. Zeke pretended to be exhausted and pointed his sword at Callie, shouting, "H-A-A-A." Zeke acted as if he was gathering all the aura in his body. At the same time, he intentionally made his aura blade rough instead of neatly compressing it. The aura blade formed on Zeke's sword in the shape of flames as if fire was blazing. It was the sword flame technique he had created when he couldn't properly control his aura in the past, but its power was not to be underestimated. Callie's expression changed as she saw Zeke's sword flame. Callie's great strength sword and Zeke's sword flame clashed. Crash. Zeke and Callie were both thrown back simultaneously. Ugh. Zeke collapsed, clutching his chest as if his aura had backfired. At the same time, he manipulated his blood flow to make his face pale. Callie, sheathing her sword, quickly approached him and handed him a potion. "Zeke, drink this quickly." Although Zeke was perfectly healthy, he took the potion Callie gave him and swallowed it with difficulty. He then returned his complexion to normal as if he had barely managed to suppress his internal injuries. "Thank you, Lady Callie Draker. Call me sister." Zeke was surprised by Callie's words. In the Draker clan, even blood-related siblings were nothing more than competitors to each other and never acted affectionately. The fact that Callie Draker, the first in line to become the head of the clan, was reaching out to Zeke, who wasn't sponsored by any clan, was a rare sight in the Draker clan. "Understood, sister." Callie Draker looked at Zeke with wonder in her eyes. "I heard you became a Blue Knight at the youngest age in the clan, and you truly have amazing skills. Even Abel wasn't this strong at your age." Before Zeke, the record for the youngest Blue Knight was held by Abel Draker. The continent was shaken when Abel became a Blue Knight at the age of 19, so one can imagine the impact of Zeke becoming one at 15. Callie continued in a serious tone. "Zeke, I originally didn't come here to say this, but after meeting you, I changed my mind." "What do you mean, sister?" "I want to make you an offer." She looked at Zeke and said, "Help me stop Abel Draker, the cruel and merciless Knight of Slaughter." Chapter 38. Completely unexpected words came from Callie's mouth. "What do you mean by stopping Abel Draker, sister?" Callie looked around and then said to Zeke, "Follow me." Callie led Zeke to the private carriage she had arrived in. It was a carriage provided to the Guardian Knights of the Four Seasons Castle, equipped with all sorts of amenities inside. She took off her silver armor, changed into casual clothes, and personally brewed tea for Zeke. "I hear you like tea. This is tea imported from the Eastern continent. I hope it suits your taste." Zeke was curious how far the information about his preference for tea had spread within the clan. Callie looked at Zeke and slowly began to speak. "Abel's knights are currently under contract with the Empire and carrying out the Emperor's missions." "Missions for the Rom Emperor?" "Yes, in fact, the Rom Empire can be considered one of Draco's biggest clients. From that perspective, Abel's actions aren't wrong." Callie put down her teacup and continued, "The problem is that Abel is increasingly crossing the line. He's actively intervening in the conflict between the Rom Empire and Alencia, which shares a border with it." "Direct intervention in a conflict? Isn't that a violation of the clan's first principle, the neutrality pledge?" "Indeed, Draco exists as a clan, not a nation, and it's our principle not to intervene in conflicts between other nations. Abel and Siemens have long crossed this line." "It's hard to believe. Are you saying that the Four Seasons Castle and the head of the clan are just watching this happen?" Callie said with a solemn expression, "Zeke, what I'm about to tell you is a clan secret. You must never speak of it elsewhere." "Of course, sister." The Four Seasons Castle is currently divided. Zeke had never been to the Four Seasons Castle in his previous life, so he knew nothing about its internal affairs. He only knew the overall flow of events he had seen in the future. Callie continued slowly. "A pro-Empire faction has emerged within the Council of Elders." Zeke immediately understood what Callie meant. The Rom Empire has drawn the Elders to their side? "I don't know the exact details, but that seems to be the case." "I don't understand. Even the Empire wouldn't have anything to tempt the Elders of the Draker clan." "I'm also investigating what methods the Emperor used." "So there are those within the Council of Elders and the Guardian Knights who have sided with the Empire. Only Abel and Siemens have surfaced, but we don't know how many more there are or who else is on the Empire's side, so we can't act rashly." Callie was surprised that Zeke grasped the complicated situation of the Four Seasons castle so quickly. He's not just skilled in martial arts. Callie nodded and said, "That's correct, so we're gathering trustworthy people within the Four Seasons castle who can stop Abel and Siemens." "You mean you're gathering forces?" "Yes, I'm trying to gather the power of the ordinary knights, who are the foundation of the Four Seasons castle rather than the Council of Elders or the main clans." The Four Seasons castle, the core of Draker, could be considered the central point for managing the thousands of knights carrying out missions across the continent, while Abel was manipulating the Council of Elders at the center. Callie moved in a completely different direction. No matter how strong the head of the clan or the Council of Elders were, it was impossible to maintain the clan without the ordinary knights. She looked at Zeke and said, "Once you graduate from Valhalla and become an official knight of the Four Seasons castle, you will have great influence and legitimacy as a pure-blood awakener." That's how much significance a pure-blood awakener holds in the Draker clan. The Prana clan, Callie Draker's maternal clan and sponsor, wasn't as influential as the Siemens or Turin clans, so they were currently at a disadvantage in the power struggle. However, even without a powerful sponsor clan, if Zeke, a pure-blood awakener and a direct descendant, supported Callie, the scales in this power game with Abel would likely tip in her favor, even if only slightly. The Four Seasons castle was also made up of people if public opinion swayed towards Callie. Even Abel, who had control of the Council of Elders, wouldn't be able to act recklessly. After listening to Callie, Zeke considered how he could use the surprisingly chaotic situation of the Four Seasons castle to his advantage. 7 years later, the balance between the three transcendent clans will collapse and the continent will be engulfed in war, and Abel Draker will be at the center of it all. Zeke looked at his older sister, Callie Draker. In the previous life he experienced, this noble silver knight would die in 5 years. She would meet a heroic end while fighting the new pirate king who emerged in the South Sea, the place that brought her fame. The death of Callie Draker, who had been the stabilizing force of the Four Seasons castle, would be a great shock to the entire Draker clan. She was implicitly considered the successor to the head of the clan, and when Callie Draker died, Abel Draker would take her place. He would then join hands with the Council of Elders, abolish the Draker clan's neutrality pledge, and actively participate in the Continental War with the backing of the Empire. Arthur Draker, the head of the clan, would condone Abel Draker's actions and then die of illness not long after. Eventually, Abel Draker, the successor, would inherit the position of the head of the clan, and Draker would lead the invasion of the Central Kingdoms and the Northern Continent. They would abandon their role as the mediators of balance in the Central Continent and become the vanguards of continental invasion. Zeke had settled in the Northern Continent for various reasons at that time and was suddenly caught up in the Continental War. Having personally experienced this chaotic future, Zeke knew that Callie's words weren't just simple concerns. Having witnessed the chaotic future of the continent, Zeke decided that it was better to help Callie and stop Abel, the Knight of Slaughter, rather than exploit the situation. For now, I'm still lacking, but I'll do everything I can to help you. Callie's eyes wavered at his words. She hadn't expected Zeke to make a decision so quickly. She looked at Zeke and said, "I made this offer because I believe that the future Zeke Draker will become an outstanding knight, surpassing all others. If you support me, this silver knight will always stand by your side." Zeke thought that she was unexpectedly pure for a Draker. While valuing discipline more than anyone else, as expected of a Draker, her inner heart was incredibly soft. Zeke stood up. "I fully agree with your idea of gathering the ordinary knights, sister. I will also become an official knight of the Four Seasons castle and help you." Callie also stood up and nodded. "Thank you, Zeke. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. And remember this, the Dracos may seem inconspicuous, but they are everywhere. Always remember that Abel and the Empire's eyes are on you." "Understood, sister." Zeke bowed to Callie and left the carriage. Walking alone on the Valhalla campus, Zeke pondered what benefits the alliance with Callie Draker would bring him. At least it's a million times better than having a madman like Abel take over the clan. Considering the situation on the continent too, Zeke's ultimate goal was to become the strongest on the continent and take over the entire Draker clan, but he didn't want to take over a Draker clan that had lost its power due to internal strife and become a puppet of the Empire. He decided to help Callie Draker and stop Abel Draker and the Rom Empire's conspiracy, as he had thought through in the carriage, and to do that, I need power. Zeke turned on the mini-app and looked at the map of Valhalla. The location of the founder Tarakan Draker's security vault was marked on the mini-app. It was none other than the Valhalla Library. Zeke entered the library after presenting his student ID. In fact, he didn't need to enroll here just to enter Valhalla, but the location of the security vault left by Tarek and Draker was in the Valhalla library. Specifically the Valhalla-only library that not everyone could enter, the dedicated library, accessible only to Valhalla students, was a secure area that outsiders were strictly prohibited from entering. This was no exception even for Zeke, a pure-blood awakener of Draker. Zeke had to present his student ID again and undergo iris recognition at the entrance to the dedicated library before he could enter. The Academy library was also quite large, but it was nothing compared to the scale of the Valhalla library. Atlas, the greatest city in the central continent, and Valhalla, located within it, were where people from all over the world gathered. As such, precious resources also flowed into this place, from rare books from the eastern continent to rhyme collections from the southern continent and storybooks containing myths from the northern continent. All kinds of books were gathered in the Valhalla library. Zeke followed the mini-app towards the security vault left by Tarek and Draker. He soon arrived at the location marked on the map. What is this place? The place he arrived at wasn't a library with books, but a storage room for unused items. Zeke examined the dusty storage room. There was no sign of the vault left by Tarek and Draker. Is there a separate entrance like in the Academy? He tried to find the entrance using his Dragon Eye skill, but he couldn't sense anything around him. Zeke expanded his search range and looked around the storage room, but he still couldn't find anything. Then, as Zeke stood in the center of the storage room, detected data update point, accessed Tarek and Draker's security vault. Do you want to update the data? Zeke chose to update the data. Updating data. Soon, a message appeared saying that the data update was complete. Zeke immediately opened the security vault. Tarek and Draker's security vault 1, Organization Operation Manual 2. Dragon Slayer Technique Manual Ver. 5.2.1, Final 3, Reference Materials 4, Collection of Aphorisms for Growth. What is this? It was more like a collection of Tarek and Draker's personal records than a security vault, though it was different from what he had in mind. Zeke decided to check it out since he had come all this way. The first thing that caught his eye was the Dragon Slayer Techniques section. Zeke clicked on the Dragon Slayer Techniques Manual. 0920_dragon_slayer_techniques_manual_final 1012_dragon_slayer_techniques_manual_really_final 11 12_dragon_slayer_techniques_manual_really_final dozens of manual documents with final in their titles were listed in a row. Zeke scrolled through the manuals and finally opened the last one recorded. He thought it would contain information about hidden secret techniques, but surprisingly, it was a compilation of basic Dragon Slayer forms. Zeke was surprised to learn that Tarek and Draker, the founder of their order, had personally created the basic Dragon Slayer manual that has been passed down to this day. It was designed as a detailed textbook on how to train in basic Dragon Slayer techniques and which parts to emphasize. As Zeke looked through the various versions of the manual, he found a note left by Tarek and Draco at the end of the manual. It should be noted that this Dragon Slayer Techniques manual is a revision of some of the forms from the True Dragon Sword art. True Dragon Sword art? Is there such a swordsmanship? Zeke read more of Tarek and Draker's words. While the True Dragon Sword art is indeed an excellent swordsmanship and aura cultivation method, it has the disadvantage of being difficult to learn and understand, making it difficult for all knights to master. The creator of the True Dragon Sword art and the first to develop the aura cultivation method, Saturn Draker, is the only human to have reached the Grand Master realm. I believe that it is absolutely necessary to inherit Saturn Draker's, who was given the title of Sword Star, True Dragon Sword art, and create a new swordsmanship that anyone can learn, so I am trying to finish this task that I have been putting off. Zeke was surprised to see what Tarek and Draker had written. Saturn Draker? A secret technique left by the noble knight? The successor of the Hero King and the first knight to create aura. Zeke turned off the manual and scanned the security archive list, and he was able to find the True Dragon Sword art stored in a corner of the reference list. Zeke turned on the True Dragon Sword art secret manual and read the first sentence. The True Dragon Sword art is the only way for humans to slay dragons. Chapter 39. Dragon Slayer Techniques? The true meaning of the dragon sword left by Saturn Draker was a method for humans to slay dragons. Zeke read through his words. With the help of the great King Kaiser, humans were able to form contracts with dragons, the so-called harmonizers of all creation. Compared to other races, humans, with their many shortcomings, were always frail beings. Dragons took pity on such humans and generously shared their knowledge with their contractors after the King Kaiser, those who contracted with. Dragons settled throughout the continents and began to establish their own civilizations. The speed of their development was so unbelievably fast that I felt a sense of fear. The fear I felt stemmed from the incomprehensible existence of dragons. If these beings with infinite power and knowledge were to one day suddenly change their minds and decide to wipe out humanity from this world, all humans would vanish on that day. Trying to suppress the fear growing within my heart, I sought various ways for humans to oppose dragons. The first thing I considered was magic. However, magic was the first gift dragons gave to humans. They taught humans how to create magic circles in their hearts to generate magical power like dragons. It was absurd to try and stop a magical race like dragons with magic. The second was the King Kaiser's elemental sword, but this power was only granted to him who inherited the blood of the Elven King at first. I researched various ways for humans to use the elemental sword. Ironically, it was the king's contracted dragon, Kronos, who most enthusiastically helped me with this research. Kronos, intrigued by my research, sought ways to transcend human limitations by combining various magical experiments. The abilities of the Eastern Continent's successors and the King Kaiser's elemental sword, and eventually, Kronos and I discovered a power called aura. We found a way to manifest a different kind of power within the human body, one that was neither elemental nor magical, having found a clue for humans to overcome their limitations. I continued my research even after King Kaiser departed to the spirit world, and finally, by completing the true dragon sword, I was able to perfectly control the power of aura. I passed this true dragon sword on to not only the kingdom of Kronos but to all human kingdoms. It was a desperate act to prevent humanity from perishing helplessly if dragons ever turned their backs on them. The problem was that there was no one who could fully understand and wield this true dragon sword. Mastering aura required arduous training and bone-chilling pain. But by using artifacts created by dragons, one could easily obtain far greater power. Thus, my true dragon sword struggled to find a proper successor, leading me to leave this secret manual. If there is a successor who finds this manual, I implore you to understand my will and diligently strive to master it. Saturn Draker's plea ended here. Simultaneously, a message appeared. Achievement Quest Intermediate Mission: Learn the True Dragon Sword, the Secret Tradition of Sword Saint Saturn Draker. Time limit 3 months. Quest Mission Reward. Title: Successor of the Sword Saint. Coordinates to the Kronos Kingdom Treasury. The Kronos Kingdom Treasury as a reward. If it was the treasury of an ancient kingdom, there was a high probability of finding valuable items. It was a useful reward for Zeke, who was trying to build his own forces. Moreover, True Dragon Sword was the origin of Dragon Slayer techniques. A secret swordsmanship, a profound technique left by Saturn Draker, the creator of Aura, would surely be the key to overcoming the Wall of the Black Knights. 3 months is the time limit. I need to focus on mastering the True Dragon Sword while I'm in Valhalla. Suddenly, Zeke noticed something strange. The Dragon Slayer bloodline of the Draker clan had a much longer history than what was commonly known. Then why was there no record of Saturn Draker's story or his successor, Terrakin Draker? Everyone knew about the feat of Dragon Slayer Terrakin Draker, who slew the evil dragon Bahamut and saved the central continent, but surprisingly not much was known about Terrakin Draker himself. Although everyone knew about the Liberation War that took place 1,000 years ago, the information available was passed down more as legends than historical facts. Because of this, Terrakin Draker felt more like a mythical hero like Kaiser than a real historical figure. Why haven't I ever questioned this before? It was more accurate to say that he hadn't felt the need to question it rather than not having questioned it at all. Zeke himself hadn't given much thought to the legend of the Dragon Slayer until he inherited Terrakin Draker's legacy. However, as he formed direct and indirect relationships with those he once considered figures of legend and myth, he began to think that there might be something hidden beneath the surface of what he knew. System: search the security archives for any personal records of Terrakin Draker, something like a diary. Searching for the administrator's request. There is one search result for your request. Zeke opened the content found by the system. A video appeared before his eyes. The video seemed to be damaged, with a lot of noise on the screen. Still, it was possible to make out the general content. It seemed like someone had recorded what they saw and heard, correcting the video. As the system corrected the video, the noisy screen became clearer than before. Something appeared on the screen. At first, Zeke couldn't recognize what it was. Then, a moment later, he realized, a dragon? A being so enormous that it seemed impossible to exist in this world was staring at Zeke. A gigantic dragon, its entire body covered in black, hard scales, looked down at him with golden eyes, just from being looked at. He felt an overwhelming pressure that seemed to annihilate everything and freeze his soul. Then, that being spoken, Tarakan. Zeke realized that the gaze in the video belonged to Tarakan Draker, Bahamut. Tarakan Draker called the black dragon before him Bahamut. Bahamut slowly lowered his head and said, "Tarakan, my contractor." Zeke was startled upon hearing those words. Tarakan was Bahamut's contractor? BZEZT. The noise intensified again. He couldn't clearly hear what Bahamut and Tarakan were saying. The screen flickered, cutting in and out. When the screen resumed, Tarakan Draker's sword was plunged right between Bahamut's eyes. It seemed like the two were conversing, but he couldn't make out what they were saying. A moment later, Bahamut completely lowered his head to the ground and closed his eyes, and starting from where Tarakan Draker had pierced him with his sword, Bahamut's body slowly turned to black ash and scattered. Only a heart shining like a jewel and one of his hardest fangs remained where his body had been, and the video ended. Zeke wore a dumbfounded expression, unable to believe what he had just seen. Bahamut was Tarakan Draker's contracted dragon? Zeke was deeply confused by the fact that Tarakan Draker and Bahamut had a contractual relationship. There was definitely something more to the legend of the Dragon Slayer than what was known. Zeke's sharp senses kicked in. Perhaps an important secret of the Draker clan is hidden within this. If he could get his hands on the clan's secret, it could become a useful card to play someday. Zeke decided to investigate the hidden details of the Dragon Slayer legend. He was currently in Valhalla Library, the best library in the central continent. Zeke began to search for and read every book on the Dragon Slayer legend in Valhalla Library, and he discovered a surprising fact: all the content is the same. As if intentionally fabricated, the information about the Dragon Slayer legend only mentioned how Tarakan Draker defeated Bahamut and ushered in a golden age for the central continent. Even more surprising was that there were no research papers or books that delved deeper into the subject. Compared to the hundreds of books and papers on King Kaiser, whose existence was uncertain, there was practically nothing on Tarakan Draker. How can this be? It was as if someone had intentionally deleted and censored all information about Tarakan Draker. Zeke even realized that in his past life, he hadn't even been aware of this situation. Feeling that there was no point in trying to learn more about Tarakan Draker at Valhalla Library, Zeke returned to the mansion. He then contacted Kay separately. He requested that she search for and send him any books on Tarakan Draker from all regions, including the central continent. A week later, Zeke received a bundle of books from Kay. They were books about the Dragon Slayer legend, written in the languages of the northern and southern continents. The problem was that these, too, were not much different from what Zeke had seen in Valhalla. Zeke read the letter Kay had enclosed. While searching for books about Tarakan Draker, I understood why you made such a request. Almost all the books available are similar. The books I brought from other continents are only slightly different in format. I also found it strange and inquired through rare book channels. Do you know what the response was? Forbidden. That was the only word I got back, and as far as I know, there's only one reason for such a reaction. It means that the ones blocking research on Tarakan Draker are none other than the Draker clan. Upon receiving Kay's letter, Zeke confirmed that his suspicions were correct. The Drakers were hiding the history of Tarakan Draker and censoring information about him. It was difficult to understand why the Drakers, who had risen to the position of one of the three transcendent clans with the title of Dragon Slayer clan, would go to such lengths to erase the past of their ancestor, Tarakan Draker. Zeke burned Kay's letter. It seemed like there was a bigger secret hidden within this than he had initially thought. It was then. Who is it? Zeke sensed the presence of intruders stealthily approaching. Having mastered elemental power through the elemental sword, Zeke's senses were on a different level compared to ordinary knights. He drew Bahamut and immediately pressed himself against the wall, concealing his body. Judging by the way they concealed their presence and moved systematically, they were professionals, not amateurs. Am I being followed by the Empire's hounds? That can't be. When he killed the hounds he encountered in the giant mountains, he only left traces of himself as a southern hitman. Moreover, he had used a portal to descend from the mountain, so there shouldn't have been any traces left behind. Puzzled, Zeke held his breath and watched as they entered his room. The intruders, dressed in black, began searching his room, unaware that Zeke was hiding. Their movements were so cautious and stealthy that if he hadn't noticed them beforehand, it would have been difficult to even detect any signs of the room being searched. Zeke realized that these were not the Empire's hounds. The hounds wouldn't move so covertly and quietly. The moment he realized this, Zeke approached them using the phantom step. Whoosh. Holding a dagger instead of Bahamut, Zeke got behind one of the intruders and immediately tried to behead him, but to his surprise, the intruder twisted his body to avoid Zeke's attack and immediately rolled out of the way, escaping. Zeke moved towards the others who hadn't yet exited the room. Swish! He threw his dagger towards their legs to prevent them from escaping. However, the other intruder also succeeded in dodging Zeke's attack and immediately tried to flee outside. They're at least the level of a purple knight. Zeke gripped his dagger and used the phantom step /. Just as he was about to escape through the window, the intruder, blocked by Zeke's sword, had no choice but to roll back into the room. The black-clad figure, his face hidden by a mask, lowered his stance and drew the sword from his waist. Seeing the sword the intruder drew, Zeke realized their identity: Northern Rangers? Chapter 40. Zeke was confused as to why the Ranger unit, also known as the Protectors of the Northern Continent, had sought him out. Could it be that Abel hired them? To eliminate me from forming an alliance with Callie? Zeke focused on the unique shape of the swords the black-clad figures were carrying. They were kukri swords used by the Rangers of the Gorka Kingdom, located at the northernmost tip of the Northern Continent. And these were the most skilled among the Northern Rangers. Their skills were so exceptional that the Central Kingdoms often paid a high price to employ them as mercenaries for important missions. Especially since Zeke had lived with the Gorka Rangers during his time in the Northern Continent, he knew very well how formidable they were. Zeke confronted the Gorka Ranger who drew his kukri, trying to grasp the situation. Why are the Gorka Rangers monitoring me? Zeke asked. The figure in black didn't answer, simply pointing his kukri at Zeke and watching for an opportunity to escape towards the window. Zeke moved to block his escape route, positioning himself with his back to the window. Just then, something flew in from outside. Thud. A small ball rolled towards Zeke's feet. Soon, a hazy smoke erupted from the ball. Mandrake root extract detected. If poisoned, you will lose consciousness. The effect of poison immunity negates the poison's effect. Thanks to the poison immunity he gained from devouring the Hydra's head, the poisonous smoke couldn't harm Zeke. However, Zeke pretended to collapse, feigning the effects of the poison. A while later, when the smoke cleared, the two figures in black carried the unconscious Zeke somewhere. The figures in black brought Zeke to a dark, narrow room, set him in a chair, and bound him with handcuffs. After confirming that he was securely bound, they left, and Zeke subtly opened his eyes. He checked his map and found that he was near a farm on the outskirts of Atlas. It seemed to be a safe house built by modifying a granary. The Northern Rangers have a safe house? It seems they have a separate employer. Even if he were imprisoned, Zeke could escape using a portal, so he had willingly pretended to be affected by the poisonous smoke. He had entered the tiger's den to find out directly why the Gorka Kingdom Rangers were trying to monitor him. Just then, someone entered the room. He approached Zeke, who was pretending to be unconscious with his eyes closed, and held a bottle to his nose. Mandrake root extract neutralizer detected. It seemed to be an antidote for the poisonous smoke. Zeke acted as if he was regaining consciousness. Ugh. The man spoke to Zeke, who had awakened. Zeke Draker. Zeke slowly opened his eyes and looked up. Who is that? A middle-aged man with a stubborn impression and an eye patch over one eye. Zeke knew who he was. Cliff Reinhardt, the owner of the Reinhardt Trading Company, one of the future top 10 trading companies of the continent. The reason Zeke recognized him immediately was due to their connection in his past life. In his past life, Abel, after taking over the Draker clan, had extended his influence to major trading companies for war supplies. At that time, the Reinhardt Trading Company tried to maintain a neutral stance, but Abel and the Empire wouldn't stand for it. They forcibly disbanded the company and confiscated its assets. In response, Cliff Reinhardt risked his life to escape from the Central Continent and deliver information to the Northern Continent. It was Zeke who had met with Cliff and relayed the information he had brought to the North. Zeke Murray, I believe you will deliver this information safely. Zeke had advised Cliff to seek asylum in the North, but he refused. I want to meet my final death in my hometown, Alencia. The future Cliff, who had accepted his death, overlapped with the present Cliff before him. Cliff spoke to Zeke, who was staring intently at him. You look at me as if you know me. Zeke deliberately changed his expression and said, I was just curious to see who was brazen enough to kidnap a member of the Draker bloodline. Cliff's expression hardened at his words. Seeing Cliff's reaction, Zeke realized that this kidnapping wasn't meticulously planned. Zeke decided to probe Cliff. Why did you kidnap me? There had to be a reason for hiring expensive Gorka Rangers and infiltrating his residence. If there was any connection to Abel, it would be beneficial to deal with Cliff Reinhardt here. It would become even more troublesome if the Reinhardt Trading Company's funds fell into Abel's hands. Zeke activated his mini-app and identified the location and number of rangers in the vicinity, 1 in the room, 1 right outside, and 10 around the building. Judging by their presence, there are only those 2 rangers. Even if they were Gorka Rangers, if Zeke displayed his true skills, he could eliminate them without leaving a trace. Just then, Cliff gestured to the ranger behind him. The ranger approached and released the handcuffs that were restraining Zeke's arms. Despite how things have turned out, I want to say that this wasn't my original intention. Zeke spoke to Cliff, who was now using honorifics. Unlike before, that's ridiculous. You trespassed and kidnapped me, and yet you say you had no such intention. Even trapped in enemy territory, Zeke showed no fear, speaking his mind casually. Cliff was slightly taken aback by Zeke's attitude. Even a seasoned knight would likely show some anxiety in this situation, but the boy in front of him displayed no such thing. Even if he's young, a Draco is still a Draker. In truth, not all Drakers would remain so composed during an interrogation. This was only possible because Zeke had undergone training to withstand all kinds of interrogation and torture during his time as a Southern hitman. He would have reacted differently if the Gorka Ranger had started a full-blown interrogation, but judging by Cliff's reaction, it didn't seem like he was hostile. Just then, Cliff spoke. Since things have come to this, some explanation seems necessary. I don't know if you've heard of me. My name is Cliff Reinhardt. I run the Reinhardt Trading Company. To Zeke's surprise, Cliff revealed his identity first. To test Cliff, Zeke deliberately put on an indignant expression and said, Reinhardt Trading Company. I don't know how big your company is, but you have the guts to mess with a Draker. Even if you kill me here, the Drakes will hunt you down to the end, and even if you don't kill me here, they will still hunt you down. No matter what you do, you'll never escape the Drakes. Cliff's expression hardened. Even for the owner of a large trading company, the killing intent of a knight was not easy to brush off. The ranger standing behind him stepped forward, trying to restrain Zeke, but Cliff raised his hand to stop the ranger. Cliff took out a document and presented it to Zeke. Please take a look at this for a moment. Zeke shifted his gaze from Cliff and slowly examined the document. But the document contained something completely unexpected. Elena Stone? Elena Stone was none other than the mother of Liam Stone, who had become his subordinate. The document Cliff brought contained information about Elena Stone contracting and recovering from the red flower plague. Zeke wondered why Cliff had brought him information about Elena Stone's illness. It's a disease that started appearing in the southern region of the central continent. It's called the red flower plague there, Cliff said, looking at Zeke. I learned that Elena Stone, the mother of Academy Cadet Liam Stone, also contracted this red flower plague and was in critical condition before recovering. Zeke Draker. Do you know anything about this? Of course he knew. Elena Stone had overcome the red flower plague thanks to the cure Zeke had provided. Zeke said to Cliff, I sent Elena Stone the cure. So what? Cliff's expression changed dramatically. So it was you, Zeke Draker, who sent the cure. How did you know the cure for this disease, which hasn't even been properly identified yet? I remembered a medicine I used to take when I had a high fever and I thought it might work, so I sent it and it just happened to work. But I don't understand why the Reinhardt Trading Company is investigating this, especially to the point of kidnapping me. Cliff shook his head. Again, I never intended for things to go this far. All I needed was… Zeke interrupted Cliff. The cure I gave Elena Stone. You were trying to find out what it was? At Zeke's words, Cliff fell silent. Looking at the speechless Cliff, Zeke deduced why he had resorted to such extreme measures. Do you have someone who urgently needs to be cured of the red flower plague? It wasn't a question, but a statement filled with conviction. Cliff realized that Zeke was no ordinary 15-year-old. Now the situation was unfavorable for Cliff. Even if he wanted to negotiate, he had to offer what the other party wanted from a much weaker position. Then Zeke spoke first. Cliff Reinhardt, let's make a deal. As soon as he grasped the situation, Zeke sought to gain the upper hand. At Zeke's words, Cliff calmly replied, What are your terms? Zeke held up 3 fingers. If you promise to grant me 3 requests in the future, I'll tell you about the cure. Cliff looked at Zeke and said, I need to know what the requests are before I can agree to the deal. I'll ask for things within the Reinhardt Trading Company's capabilities. After some contemplation, Cliff looked at Zeke and said, If you agree to draw up a contract that formalizes these terms, I'll accept the deal. Zeke grinned and nodded. All right, A contract is a must for a deal. At Cliff's gesture, the ranger went outside and brought paper and a pen. Cliff took his time meticulously drafting the contract. Zeke read through the contract Cliff had written. "It looks fine, but one thing," he said to Cliff. "The person who needs to be cured of the red flower plague, you have to tell me who that person is." Cliff's expression hardened even more than before. He looked at Zeke and said, "I can't tell you that." "Then there's no deal." After some deliberation, Cliff realized he had no choice and slowly opened his mouth. "I can only tell you that it's one of the Alencia royals." Zeke clicked his tongue. "If that's how it's going to be, then there's no deal." Cliff clenched his teeth. Then he finally spoke. "Melissa Alencia." At Cliff's words, Zeke's eyes changed. The first princess of Alencia. Alencia was currently in a dispute with the Ram Empire over control of the Beastmen ghetto in the border region. The Alencia kingdom was already in a state of internal instability, with the royal family and the nobility in sharp conflict. The Ram Empire, taking advantage of this opportunity, had built and deployed a large military base in the border region, coveting the Beastmen ghetto, which was Alencia's territory. Melissa Alencia was a popular figure among the people, thanks to her effective public policies in contrast to the sickly and incompetent king. Moreover, public opinion was growing that if she inherited the throne, the royal authority would be restored, and the internal power struggle with the nobles would end. If Melissa Alencia, a major figure in the central continent's political landscape, were to fall ill and be unable to succeed to the throne, the chaotic situation in the Alencia kingdom would undoubtedly worsen. Zeke asked Cliff, "Why is the Reinhardt Trading Company so eager to cure Melissa Alencia's illness?" "We were in the midst of negotiating a major deal with Princess Melissa. If something were to happen to the princess before the deal is finalized, the entire company would suffer a significant loss, so we were trying to find a cure by any means." In his past life, the Reinhardt Trading Company grew, centered around the Alencia kingdom, eventually becoming one of the top 10 trading companies on the continent. Cliff Reinhardt had even said that he wanted to die in Alencia if he were to die, so it was understandable that he already had significant influence there, given his attachment to the kingdom. However, even so, it was still puzzling why he would go so far as to hire Gorka Rangers and infiltrate the residence of a Draker bloodline member. Although it wasn't fully developed yet, the current Reinhardt Trading Company had a certain amount of financial resources, so if it was really urgent, they could have just bought the cure. "There must be something I don't know." Zeke looked into Cliff Reinhardt's eyes. Having mastered the elemental sword, Zeke had become more proficient in handling mana and could now sense the emotions of others more keenly. He tried to read the emotions he felt from Cliff: desperation, anxiety, deep loyalty. It didn't seem like he was trying to save Princess Melissa simply for the sake of a deal. Zeke realized that there was something more between Princess Melissa and the Reinhardt Trading Company. At least with Cliff, it was clear that their relationship went beyond a simple business transaction. He felt that he might be able to gain something bigger through this deal. Zeke signed the contract that Cliff had presented. Cliff breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing Zeke's signature. Then Zeke spoke. "All right, Cliff Reinhardt. First, I have a request." He looked at Cliff and said, "You need to get me a job."